the dirt, but those people got radiated. Now take a look at the NRC. That's supposed to work for you and me, but they promote atomic industry. We get radiated. And when you get radiated, they're gonna just fall down and die. But contamination builds up in your body, and radiation joins your life. Well, take a look at where your money goes. They built a worldwide nuclear show. We gotta get up and tell them no, we don't wanna be radiated. You put your left foot in, you put your right foot in. Say goodbye to your feet. Well, they poison all the air you breathe and all the food you eat. Look at the Pentagon, what do you see? Those boys are planning World War III. They're playing games with humanity. We get radiated. Well, we gotta get together and stop those Pentagon plans. 'Cause there won't be no future if we leave it in the military's hands. Take a look at where your money goes. You see the military budget grow. We gotta get up and tell them no, we don't wanna be radiated. You put your left foot in, you put your right foot in. Say goodbye to your feeling. They poison all the air you breathe.
Radiation leaked out at Harrisburg. For the first 3 hours, they tried to contain the news of the meltdown at TMI. They tried to put a blanket on all the media.
We don't know how many accidents happened up there that we weren't told. Med-Ed's not the one that told us. There was a person on a two-way radio that got word of what was going on inside the building, and he's the one that left it out then to civil defense.
At TMI, it leaked out. The workers were talking about it. Civil defense monitors were going up. If there was no way they could have hid the news of the meltdown at TMI.
They had film clips of the helicopter with the monitors approaching TMI. And before it got over the smokestacks, you could see the Geiger counter just redline, you know, while they were over it and as they went past it. And nobody in the cockpit said a word about what the Geiger counter was doing. They had the sound on and everything. But you could sit there and watch the needle just redline itself. And I saw that, then I called my mom and dad and told them to get the hell out. I said, those folks aren't telling you everything.
They brought on the news that there was a crack in Unit 1 reactor, and the goosebumps just went up and down my arm because this has been a nightmare, the whole thing to us, and it has really changed our lives. I guess it has really touched us the whole way through, I guess you'd say.
Oh, yes. There were some of them deathly afraid of the situation. It's like electricity, you know, people don't stick their finger in the socket because they can't see the volts, and that's the same type. The only thing is this gives off more deadly stuff, you know, that you cannot see, and it gives it off, such as iodine, in the air, and, you know.
The information that we were getting here in the immediate area was so scratchy until we did not know just how serious this whole thing was, that we were sitting on a powder keg here, and at any time that we could have been in a very serious danger.
A 25 microcount is normal background radiation. We got 350 count within the school, and then we got something like 25,000 outside of the school. We opened the window, which we were not supposed to do, put the counter out, and it sounded like a machine gun. It was just, instead of the normal little click, click, click that you get, it was just a barrage, just a continual sound.
No, I had 16 goats ready to deliver, and I couldn't go anywhere unless I took them with me. So I had to stay right here, and I was outside working in the barn and on the land. So whatever we got from that, why, I got it.
I just left because I was scared. I didn't know anything about strontium-90 or plutonium or uranium or anything at all.
We moved our kids out of the area, which some of the children didn't, But they tell us it's not safe for a preschool child to be in the area. Well, how do I know it's safe for my 8-year-old son to be in the area if it's not safe for a 5 or 6-year-old son?
Then when I got out to the van, then I really knew what happened because my mom and dad were there and we had everything packed in the van ready to go down to my grandma's. And well, then I got really scared. If I would hear the fire sirens going, that's a scary time too, because like right about a couple days after the time when we get home, when we hear the fire sirens, we always get scared. But well, that ain't really happening anymore because well, we feel okay now. But well, still, I wish it wouldn't have happened.
It was weird because all I wanted was to get my husband and my daughter and leave. Do you know what I mean? I went through the totally unlogical feeling of wanting to open up a back door and take off on foot. It was like I had to sit there and hold myself from just bolting, totally irrational bolting.
It was really awful. For me, it was like being in a dream when, I don't know if you've ever had a dream like this, when you can't get your feet moving fast enough, like they're either stuck in tar or in sand or in something where you just can't move fast enough, and I felt that I could have carried the car quicker than I could drive it. And I went to the schools and got each one of the children and just in a very controlled state, just drove right out of here. Yeah.
Our cattle, we saw a lot of cattle. We lost a total of 21 cows and calves that we saw die here in this farm. Sure, that hurts. That hurts deeply.
Our first calf was stillborn, and then the cows would live for about a week after that, and then they'd die.
I was involved in one of the incidences where one farmer had a number of stillbirths and cows dying after birth.
We had our first calf that was stillborn, and the cow lived for about somewhere around 6 or 7 days after that, and then the cow died. We had 7 cows that had calves stillborn, and then the cows died a week after that.
We've had red blotches on our arms over that period. We had blotches that big red, bright red in our arms. We took baths, and the next day or two it was gone. But that was definitely radiation exposure. But sure doesn't make you feel good to realize that me and my wife and family have been exposed to it. It sure doesn't make you sleep good at night, put it that way. There's 17 farmers that we're in contact with that have lost cattle and had cattle-related deaths and things like that in the area.
And to date, we have severe deficiency, which is shown as severe arthritis, blindness, multiple fractures of bones all over the body, especially the rib bones and the long bones of the animals. And this fracture area were of multiple nature.
The state veterinarian's office had looked into that, and as I understand it, these were found to be a result of virus and not radiation-induced. Radiation takes a long time to produce any health effects anyway. It doesn't happen right after.
And this indicates that there was some type of an imbalance or some type of a deficiency that would cause this. We don't have this condition in other areas. It's only in this small area around this particular neighborhood. When the wind is coming this way, it's always on cloudy weather, and the vapors from the plants do not rise very high in the air. Therefore, they're not dispersed over a large area.
A lot of the trees around here are burnt. They look like they're burnt. I don't know what's wrong with them.
Turn around and look. I wondered why the abnormality of the color of the leaves there. I noticed the birds right after TMI accident. They were picked up, were just laying dead.
There's about 7 farms on this side of the river that are having trouble. And they're with us, but they won't tell the public about it because they're scared that they'll get cut off by the milk company and things.
My milk market is at stake because I spoke up. Due to the reason that I did speak up, the publicity, what it's going to do to the milk market and things like that, I can see that point. But if I keep quiet and they fire this thing up and it does something a whole lot worse, won't I feel guilty, feeling like I should have spoke up more than what I did? If I see people killed, that may be prevented by somebody speaking up and trying to tell the truth.
We never had this trouble with them before we had the power plant over here. My daddy moved here in this place in 1914.
Right after the accident, I had 4 baby lambs born. They looked perfectly normal. They only lived a few hours. And I had a pregnant goat die full of 4, there was 4 babies in her. We had her autopsied. And I had 2 other baby goats die. And rabbits, which I have always been able to raise, 4 litters in a row were all born dead and deformed right after that.
Those few days we spent at the house right across from 3 Mile, we did get sore throats, which it does affect your thyroid glands in your throat. And everybody around the area had the sore throat. And doctors wouldn't believe you. They say it's your imagination.
People, their senses are extremely heightened as a result of this. People can smell, see, and believe they're seeing things that aren't there.
Literally hundreds of people in the Harrisburg area have experienced the classic symptoms of radiation sickness over the past several months. Now, I might be somewhat skeptical of this, given my own personal background and biases, if I had not been one of those.
Well, the wind was coming from over there, and I was hanging my wash up, and my eyes really burnt. Water was running out of them, and I was rubbing them. I had bloodshot eyes till I had my wash hung up.
Many, many people have reported sore throats, nausea, diarrhea, skin rashes, burning eyes, the so-called metallic taste and metallic odor.
I've also had, I was down around the plant also, and on certain days you could taste a metallic taste in your mouth.
The next morning you could taste it in your mouth.
Left Friday, and we came, my parents came back Saturday, and I came along to help do the work. And during that day I got sick on my stomach, and my lips tasted funny. Like, they said the iodine makes your lips taste bitter-like. And so I went in and laid down for a while, and then we went down to a restaurant near here to get some food, and it tasted awful bitter. Nothing tasted right. So they told us that if you tasted down your lips, and if you were sick, I was nauseous and things, if you were like that for more than, they said, an hour or so, that you had too much of the radiation. And I had it for about 8 hours. That don't sound too good.
And people say no one died as a result of the accident. That's absolute medical ignorance to say that, because no one just drops dead from radiation. It takes a long time for the cancers to develop.
They just told us there ain't nothing they can do about it.
The instant that you're irradiated, the chain of events in some cell, and you set in motion irreversibly on the path to cancer. And that means that the injury is immediate, not later. You now have the formation of cancer.
Radiation is going to continue to be released in Harrisburg for the next 2 years as that accident is cleaned up. It's a guinea pig population. The incidence of malignancy is obviously going to rise, and genetic disease, it's going to take 20, 30, 40, 50 years to discover what that means.
Of course, we're not all dropping dead right now. But in 20 years, come back. We're going to be some of the loudest sick people anybody has ever seen.
Do you have a thought about why they do body scans?
Well, they're looking for radioactive materials in their bodies. The trouble is that plutonium doesn't emit gamma radiation, and the body scanners only measure gamma, which is coming out of the body. Alpha radiation only travels a distance of a couple of cells in the body, and beta radiation a little further, but it doesn't get out the body.
One good way to allay the public's suspicions would be to have them do a whole body scan, because nothing is going to show up anyhow.
So they were just testing to see if people had stuff inside them. And I know one woman said to me that she had radiation in her body, but they said it was because she lived in a stone house. Just because the house just happened to be next to Harrisburg reactor didn't seem to bother them at all.
This is precisely the kind of thing they told to the people around the area of fallout in Utah. That when there were high levels registered, they said, oh, well, your drinking water has got a lot of natural radium in it. There is no such thing as cesium-137 and strontium-90 in the natural environment.
Some of the children that from my practice were tested for radiation. They had body scans, and it was found that there were increased levels of radiation in their bodies. So what are we supposed to tell these families? That there is indeed increased level of radiation. We don't know what's going to happen, and they are just part of the experiment. But and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission released the body scans and gave them to the family, and they told them this is it. This is the background radiation, and the amount of radiation that your child has is above background, and it's this much. So I think that it creates a lot of anxiety in the parents.
Where was the cesium in his body?
The level shows a rise from head to toe, but mostly in the head. Mostly on the upper body.
Who showed it to you?
The pediatrician.
Well, cesium's only made in nuclear reactors.
I want to show you this chart because I think it's interesting. It's one of my patients. He lives in the 5-mile radius. This is the background radiation, and this is the amount of radiation that it's definitely above the background radiation of this patient. This is the head and this is the feet. They give this chart to the parents and say, wow, well, yeah, it's high. Probably you live in a brick home. What are the parents supposed to think? They say, well, it's minimal, it's only 2.03 cesium. Cesium-137 is definitely a substance that is generated in nuclear reactors.
Well, Brian had a scan. They had a scan downtown where they went and laid in this big thing and they checked for radiation elements, I guess. And it was some outfit from California. I don't know who it was. And they went back and they had mentioned to Stephanie about we must live in a brick house because it showed he had some. I don't even know what it was really, but he was a little higher than most people. And they said, well, you must live in a brick house, this is the reason. So we were a little concerned after we thought about that for a while, and we got in contact with the people to get the results of the test, and it took us, what, 6 months?
No.
How long did it take us to get the test? Well, we got the test, and then we took it to our doctor, and he said he could get someone to analyze it for us. And then just this past week, we finally got to talk to him, and there's 2 things they tested for, and one, he had told us one was cesium, which is, I think when the core melts, that's what comes out, and he had a higher than normal reading on that. So, that's the only real evidence that we would think. And plus, everything has come out in the press now, where maybe there was a lot more that came out than we know of, the instruments went bad and all that.
Did the doctor tell you what to do?
He said there wasn't, anything that we can really do because it's never happened before, and that the only thing we can do is keep getting physicals for the children and just keep an eye on it and see if anything develops. He said there's just nothing to compare it to. He says it may have an effect, it may not. It's just nothing they don't know.
The baby's only a year old. What'll happen to her 20 years from now is when anything that did happen to us will show up. 15 to 20 years, she'll just be starting to get married and make her own plans for a family. How do you tell her she can't have any kids? Because of 3 Mile Island.
What do you feel about nuclear power now?
A child's life should never be put second in order to be able to turn a light switch on.
I agree with that. And I have strong feelings on that too. Well, just what my wife said. You know, it's been eating away at me ever since it happened. You know, and we discussed, especially this week, we've been discussing a lot more, and it just seemed to come up a little more recently. And you know, it's just I never really brought it out to Steph how bad it did bother me. You know, to think that you don't know what's really happening to your children, and I don't believe that that nothing's coming out of 3 Mile Island. You know, I just don't trust them. Yeah, you don't know. Can you stop a minute? Can you stop?
The word is out. I know some of you don't want to hear it, but a nuclear poisons anything that's near it. Hallelujah. Does anybody care? It might hit you now. It may take 30 years. Leukemia and cancer have already taken their toll. Do you want to die young? Do you want to grow old? The crop is in. It's another one you can't eat. It's been poisoned by radioactive leaks. Word is out. I know some of you don't want to hear it, but a nuclear reactor poisons anything that's near it. These nuclear towers, they're big money makers. But for you and for me, they're just like big salt shakers. They're sprinkling death, pouring contamination. They could be the gravestone of a dying nation. Shut 'em down! Get up on your feet! If we don't beat them in the courts, then we'll meet them in the street. Shut 'em down! Get up on your feet! If we don't beat them in the courts, we gotta meet them in the street.
Well, as far as our lives, it's affected us to the point that I just don't believe in it. I think there has to be safer methods, and the money we spend on nuclear energy could be spent to develop coal, or especially in Pennsylvania with as much coal as we have. Why risk something like this happening? You know, we got lucky this time. It cooled off. But if it wouldn't have, like the transcript came out afterwards, that Saturday when it was heating up, they didn't even know what was going to happen, you know, down there. Something you don't know anything about like that. I just don't trust it. I think, you know, for everybody's sake, I think they should go try to get in another field for energy. I just don't believe in it at all anymore.
You tell yourself really didn't happen and it's not going to happen to you because we're running away from something that we can't even see. It's just something somebody's telling us is there and is getting us to see it. You can see a flood, you can see if your house burns down, but you just can't see something that you just can't see it. You know, we left for 11 days. We didn't really know why we were leaving. We could see pictures on the television of a flood coming at you, but the radiation was there, but we just couldn't see it. And now they said it was so high they couldn't even monitor it.
What would you do if the plant opened again?
I would, this is what we have been discussing, and I don't think I would stay here. I don't even know if I'm going to stay here while they clean it up. I just don't know if I, you know, my house is a year old and my family's lived here, you know, my mother and my father and everybody, all their lives, you know, I would still move. We still might, you know, because what's in there now has to be cleaned out. And they don't even know, and I don't know, and I don't trust them.
The accident will go on, will continue, quite literally for years. It cannot help but continue during the cleanup of the plant.
Now, I was at TMI just last Friday. I was part of the first anti-nuclear delegation to set foot on the island and get close-up view of the reactor. We met with Vice President Harvey, and he said that they fully expect to dump 2 million curies of radiation right into the air and 1 million gallons, 800,000 gallons of radioactive water with cesium-137 right into the Susquehanna River.
They do not have a cold shutdown down there. It is not the same type of cold shutdown that they've had in other reactors. My personal opinion, from what I can understand, is that they essentially have a runaway reactor there. They can't get it stopped.
TMI, too, is not in a cold shutdown. The radioactivity is leaking out of the plant, both by conscious releases, like the 4,000 gallons that they released a few days ago, and just by leaks that they are not particularly in control of. And that release of radioactivity will go on for years.
What has happened since the accident, and I call it the radiation fear syndrome, is that now any additional amount of radioactivity that's discharged that people are very, very concerned about, and that is the problem. I don't know how to resolve that problem.
Releases to the river have been very, very low, and each liquid release would be monitored prior to its discharge.
When things that were still kept inside the reactor buildings are now planning on being released, now we're going to see the isotopes that didn't get out now coming out, and now we're going to see the strontiums and the cesiums and those kinds of isotopes.
The only other likely release is if the containment building contains a fair amount of krypton gas, which is a long half-life of about 10.5 years.
Krypton could be released to the air. The cleanup of the water could be released to the environment within the allowable limits, but no one says the allowable, will accept the allowable limits anymore. They want zero, and zero is impossible. And someplace between the allowable limit and zero.
I'm going to live there. Unit 2 is going to be deadly for years. They won't be able to go in there for years, if ever. So that I don't know what kind of radioactivity is being released from there. I don't want to live near it, even if it's in perfect operating condition, because I don't like the normal routine. They keep saying, oh, well, that's allowable by law. This is allowable by law. It's within allowable limits. I don't like that. I don't want anything anymore. I think they're just using us as guinea pigs.
How long would it take to release the gases inside 3 Mile Island, inside the storage room?
I would think they would try to do it slow enough so that the amount of each release would be within some acceptable, quote, you know, NRC guidelines. But when you add it all up, they're going to release all of it.
You now have to also get rid of the water when you're through, which will be highly radioactive. And this covers the reactor, which is big in itself, 20 or 30 feet. So we have a tremendous amount of radioactive water, which must be then decontaminated and taken away.
Put where?
Well, the only way that's been suggested is to dump it in the Susquehanna after it's been decontaminated.
How much water has accumulated at this point?
Well, in the auxiliary building, there are about 300,000 gallons of contaminated water. In the basement of the containment building itself, about 600,000 gallons. And in the primary coolant system itself, about 100,000 gallons. So that adds up to roughly 1 million gallons.
Is that an increasing amount of water?
It is increasing at a very slow rate. We estimate that total leakage is less than 1/2 gallon a minute, which is perhaps 700 gallons a day, which is, of course, small in comparison to 1 million gallons. But it is continuing, yes. By the time that water is cleaned up, no matter what it contains, if it is discharged to the river, or if it's taken off-site, or if it's evaporated, the requirements will be that the purity of the water will have to be at environmental standards.
Then there never was an expectation that the water would be completely clean. It will simply be within the regulations.
You can never clean all of the radioactivity out of the water, just as you can't, make anything 100% pure. But I think, as I indicated before, the water would be cleaned down to our environmental requirements, which would mean that it would be safe for drinking, it would be safe for recreational use, safe for fishing, and it's not within our regulations really at this point in time to require it to go further.
What do you think about the way our government has managed nuclear power, nuclear energy?
What can I say? Gross. They lie. They're lying at Harrisburg. The NRC have lied.
When anybody can say, we'll give you 1/10 of a millirem per year, and insist on the standard being 1,700 times higher, you can only draw one conclusion. This undoubtedly is the biggest liar I have ever encountered in my entire existence.
They don't understand genetics. They don't understand biology. They say it's safe. They say it's safe because they don't understand it. And they are dealing with human lives not just now, but for the next 1,000,000 years, because that's how long the radioactive waste remains potent.
The entire nuclear energy industry rests on a fraud. And that fraud is that there's a safe amount of radiation. That's what they sell to the workers. That's what they sold to the utility companies, and what the utility companies have been selling to the public.
Now, inside that reactor, the radiation level is extremely high. And eventually those men are going to have to go in there. And there are going to be every precaution taken before they do enter to make sure that no one does receive more radiation than they're allowed. And I think we have the people down there that are capable of looking at the situation, and when they say it's okay for our people to go in, then I feel that it's safe for them.
We do common laboring work. So therefore, in the restoration of this plant and the decontamination of the plant, the labor will take a great part in that facility. Now, it'll be problematical and be interesting to note how many of our people will actually work there. We can't force people to go to work. That's against the Second Amendment.
It is highly dangerous. It is lethally dangerous. And we have workers dying every day today from exposures that occurred 25 and 30 years ago in nuclear activities when the government used to tell everyone it was safe.
I don't know whether our safety man, our safety inspector, knows enough about nuclear power to know what is safe and what is unsafe.
The fact is it wasn't safe, and it can be established now that it was not safe.
We've been out and out lied to for many years as to some of the inherent dangers and the problems, and I think 3 Mile highlights that. I don't think all of the truth was ever known about the problems that we had in other industrial accidents.
There's plenty of evidence around today. St. George, Utah is a classic. We survey our members today, the state of health of our members who worked in the nuclear submarine construction phase for defense armaments and implements in this country. And their rates of cancer are 6, 7, 8 times and more what it is for all the people that worked in other parts of the shipyard. So no one can say with any reliance whatsoever on fact that it isn't lethally dangerous. It is.
The incident is not over. It's still going on. True, the unit's in a state of cold shutdown, but the unit is still there. You have the contaminated water problem. You have, I'm sure, contamination inside of the containment vessel and things of that nature. So the problem is still not over. Eventually they're going to have to go inside when they go in to find.
I don't think there's been such a major problem as this before. So it's going to take a lot of new technology in order to remove the spent fuel material in the reactor.
Will an evacuation be necessary? A very precautionary one, a small one. It's not over yet. A lot of people think it is. Things have returned to normal, and for that I'm grateful. But it's still in the back of my mind that it's just not over yet.
The releases that have already been made are small compared to what you can look forward to in the future being released, because it's basically the destruction of the core was so extensive that there's no way really to contain that radioactivity.
When they open up the reactor, they have no idea how they're going to get the fuel out. They're going to have to design all kinds of systems to get the fuel out. We still have an emergency. We feel we're working under emergency conditions all the time, and one has to go very slowly and very carefully to handle these problems.
The removal of this material, depending on what sort of shape it is in, will also require the same type of procedure, some sort of a tool to get down there, hook onto the fuel elements themselves or whatever is left of the fuel elements, and they'll all be handled underwater. One couldn't stand the radiation that would ensue if the water didn't separate the people from the fuel itself.
Is there any danger from emitters like plutonium into the air from the containment?
We've found them in very trace amounts in some of the liquid, radioactive liquid measurements that we've made, but that would be expected. We have made measurements in the of gross alpha emitters, and again, they've been in the very, very low ranges in the water in the auxiliary building, and I expect that there may be some in the water in the reactor building, which we have not measured as yet.
Now, the liquid in the water in the auxiliary building, that's the water that they shunted out from the primary coolant that had spilled in the reactor into the auxiliary building? Well, that means that the cladding on the fuel rods definitely had melted, and that's the first hard evidence I've had that plutonium got out. That means that probably in the first 48 hours, when they vented the primary coolant, plutonium was released. That means that if plutonium was released, so was curium, americium, californium, neptunium, all the alpha emitters, as well as all the elements. If plutonium got out, that means that the cat's out of the bag.
And we still don't know what's going to happen once they open the reactor up, and there are no barriers between the fission products in the core and the environment. Once you break the three barriers down, the containment, the reactor, and you've already lost the cladding, those fission products, the fuel is available to the environment. So
I would feel much better if they would just turn it off and forget it, you know, rather than trying to fix it. And I kind of think the people that work there, it's just a joke about all of us, and I don't know, I guess it's something they really couldn't worry about, you know, all the time, but still the problem is there, and there wouldn't be any problem if it wasn't on.
If we don't get better answers, then we tear it down, get rid of it, because they're going to have to sit like 3 Mile Island. It may sit for 250 years before they can even go in the containment building where the accident occurred. And the ratepayers are all going to pay the price of that.
It's a long-term experiment, and the people in Harrisburg are guinea pigs like they are in Hiroshima. And I've just been to Hiroshima, and the people in Harrisburg want to be a sister city to Hiroshima, and that's very appropriate. People are still dying of cancer now in Hiroshima, 35 years after the bomb was dropped.
Harrisburg, it ain't just one city, there are hundreds of its kind. Harrisburg, no, we're not sitting pretty, you can't play so dumb, oh, don't be so blind, there's catastrophe near you, yes, near your hometown, and all across this nation, we are sitting on bombs. Shut them down. Oh, the children, we must leave them a whirl. Shut them down. Stop these corporate criminals while we can still take a breath. Shut them down. We must save our children. Save them from a nuclear death.
Essentially, the core of the reactor is destroyed. All the radioactivity has been released into water and air. And most of it, the bulk of it, is still inside the containment building. But there's no way that they're going to clean that all up and safely pack it away. And it's going to end up spilling out. It is being released.
At night and when it's raining. Now, when it rained yesterday around noon, then they were letting it out. They do it when it's rainy weather or at night.
They said that there's a cold shutdown. Well, when I go up to Saul on a clear day, I can see steam coming out of there.
And I'm not even sure if there are releases. If there are, that they are well within acceptable health limits.
Well, I'm glad they are, but we ought to see the numbers, and I don't want to see the numbers. So I can myself make the calculations and not be told whether it's low level or it's unimportant. We ought to have the numbers in picocuries.
There have been a number of low-level releases made to the water because some of the streams discharged to the Susquehanna do contain low amounts of radioactivity. The environmental requirements for the whole 3-mile facility, which meet the NRC environmental requirements as well as EPA's drinking water standards, would allow up to 10 curies of radioactivity each quarter to be released, each calendar quarter.
Sounds like a small number, doesn't it? Right. 10 curies is nothing more than 10 grams. 10 grams of anything is not much bigger than a little sugar cube of heavy metals. 10 grams of radioactive radium, for instance, 20, 30 grams like that, a quantity like that, were the entire world's supply of radium in the years before the bomb. But from the nuclear plant at Millstone, they discharged the equivalent of 5 million grams worth of radium into the atmosphere of Rhode Island and Connecticut. Not all of it was as toxic as radium. Radium is one of the more toxic. But the iodine coming out gram for gram for the fetus is much more toxic than the radium. And as far as we know now, 10 million curies went into the air of the people of Harrisburg within a matter of a few days.
The NRC environmental requirements based on our regulations contained in Appendix I of 10 CFR Part 50 for the river would basically limit the total dose. So an individual could receive 3 millirem per year from drinking water, fish, and recreational activities, and one calculates back then and finds out that with that type of a restriction, the plant could release about 10 curies per year into the water.
Sure, it was safe to drink the water during the time of heavy bomb testing, too. Now we know that the people who were drinking the water 5 or 10 years later had a greater risk of developing cancer.
Whatever low levels are being released are not harmful to the public. I'm an optimist at heart, and I want to believe that, and I do believe it because I have to have faith.
Just as the temperature of the river water is protected, so is the ecology. The river is not polluted by 3 Mile Island's operations. Water in the nuclear reactor also is in a closed system. Our air is protected too, since there is no combustion of fossil fuels at a nuclear station. Our air and our environment remain unaffected, and the natural beauty continues untouched.
You should believe absolutely nothing whatever that they say. And the outrage of getting ready to dump that water in the Susquehanna, they were going to dump it even without any cleanup until the Lancaster residents raised hell. Now they say they'll dump it at the safe NRC standards. The safe NRC standards, translated into plain English, is a license to commit murder. The dose they will give people will cost lives.
If we wish to require that installed in an operating plant, we do have to consider the relative cost and the relative gain in safety. Likewise, in our environmental regulations, we do consider the cost-benefit of further reductions in the release of radioactive effluents, both gaseous and liquids. And these releases are already down to very low level, and the cost-benefit is taken into account because it costs a great deal more to get them down almost to zero.
So when the NRC gives you a safe standard, they're saying how many people they think it's all right to murder in exchange for keeping nuclear power plants open.